Good evening, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update, part of the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 20th, 2020, recorded around 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a look at Tropical Storm Beta this evening, again, the convection this afternoon and evening has waned quite substantially from what we had earlier with an attempt to build an inner core structure. We no longer see that now occurring, and all the deep convection has basically waned. This is because we have substantial dry air that is getting wrapped around from time to time, as the storm cannot build a formative inner core with all of these pulses from this dry air. And this is one of the things that is allowing the storm to not really intensify all that much. And this is going to continue happening all the way up until landfall in Texas over the next several days. We'll have a pulsing period, and then we'll have this period of maybe even some weakening while we don't have any substantial convection. That's, again, thanks in part because all this dry air keeping what inner core structure was trying to build, especially earlier this afternoon, to a very minimal, and we don't have any substantial convection around right now. Really, the only convection to really speak of is pushing near the Louisiana coastline and then up some here near Texas, but we don't really see much of any inner core semblance this evening. That has basically fallen apart. We may still have some shallow convection, but that is now starting to weaken as well. And we'll have another burst of convection probably, later this evening. But by far, certainly, it is good news at the moment. Now, we can see on the larger satellite kind of shot here, we can see that right now we have this very dry air mass back across Texas, and this is because a high-pressure system is now setting up across the Midwest United States right now, and we're getting on the backside of this because a trough moved through. It brought down a lot of dry air from the Canadian prairies, basically, and up near Canada and the Northwest United States, and it's now funneled all of this dry air and lingering across the Midwestern United States. So you can see that where the moist air is in the atmosphere, somewhat of moist air, enough to support at least somewhat of convection, is kind of capped all throughout here. Anywhere to the north of this, you have a substantial capping inversion, and you have substantial mid-level dry air, which is preventing thunderstorms to rise up and develop. And because that we have obviously a tropical system down here, this dry air is getting transplanted and kind of imposed on the storm, and it's wrapping around, kind of forming a cutoff actually between the convection out to the east and the tropical cyclone out to the west. So we have convection over here that's kind of pushing some showers and thunderstorms over through Louisiana and the Florida Panhandle. Some decent convection over here, which we'll talk about, a little system over here. But most of this, by and large, is because of dry air getting pulled down from the, kind of from the north and getting wrapped around into the circulation. And that is what is causing limit convection. And we can see this on the GFS forecast here, that by 0Z, this is literally within about the next few minutes, we have this dry air. We can see all this very dark brown colors out here across near Brownsville, Corpus Christi area. And this is all getting wrapped around into our circulation. And we can see that most of the center, which is kind of in here, is devoid of this green moisture. This is the more moist air in the atmosphere, all pushed off to the west and then also pushed around to the north of this. And that's allowing this dry air to get really wrapped in. Now we can see that the storm might undergo another burst here where it tries to mix out all of this dry air. Now, unlike the last several days, or unlike days previous where we thought this was going to take a little bit more of a turn out like here and maybe track into Louisiana, that solution is now starting to change. Now, one of the reasons for that is because this moved further north than it was supposed to yesterday, and this also means that the dry air has less time to get mixed out. And if we look here on the HWRF solution, we can see here that going out in time, we continue to see what appears to be this mid-level relative humidity core that doesn't really want to move all that much. But finally, by tomorrow, we start to get this pocket of moist content to be able to develop and insulate the storm. We may see another bout, maybe some slight intensification as kind of time progresses. We may have seen an earlier burst of intensification to get it maybe near hurricane intensity for a little bit, and now it's starting to weaken once again, and it may try to re-strengthen a little bit. Either way, if this storm makes landfall around Texas and it's in the strengthening phase, you can easily see 60, 70, maybe even 75 mile per hour wind gusts, and obviously a lot of rainfall, torrential rainfall causing flooding and storm surge. And there's already been a few storm surge problems today. So this remains a dangerous threat, although the rainfall totals are drastically down from earlier. But this can still easily dump, 4 to 6 inches of rain in a short amount of time, and this is going to be problematic as time progresses over the next several days. Now, if we look here on the HWRF, this is the 6Z model run, but we'll kind of move out here to about 0Z, and we can see that what happens is our earlier trough that brought our storm towards the north and east has now since moved well out here, and is now the storm is basically now encompassed within a strengthening ridge. And we can see that here, that this is almost all zonal flow across the United States, and we can see this upper bound of the trough here. That is the trough, and we have mainly zonal flow across the rest of the United States at the moment, and then you can clearly see where the trough is up here. But this zonal flow is suggesting that we have a ridge, and this is not a very strong ridge, but we actually have winds coming down here that is forcing this storm to the northwest here, towards the west and northwest. So this is actually what's going to be pushing our storm faster towards the Texas coastline, and we can see that here, that on the model, the storm makes landfall somewhere early tomorrow morning around the Texas coastline, and this is very consistent with the models. And again, this is going to move very slowly across this region, so rainfall is going to be a concern. Obviously, tropical storm force winds, and if you do get caught under a strengthening phase, you could easily see these winds ramp up, maybe sustained 50, 60 with gusts near hurricane force. That's easily possible. Now, the hurricane watch has been dropped. This is not expected to really ramp up and to be a hurricane anymore. But the rainfall, that storm surge, yes, that is expected to be a problem. And just because it's only a tropical storm and doesn't look the best right now, worry about what it looks like at landfall. And we saw a strengthening phase earlier, potentially, when recon left. And we could easily see that happen right as it's trying to make landfall along the coast. That's where you're going to see your substantial impacts. Easily could be, bad. It could easily turn, a situation that is not favorable for you. So you just need to be monitoring this. Of course, the official Hurricane Center forecast keeps us around into Texas throughout the next several days. It moves very slowly, finally becoming post-tropical over southeast Texas and in through Louisiana. And maybe even the remnants could actually make it all the way out here into portions of Tennessee over the next several days. But you can see this orange tropical storm wind field over here, very wide and expansive tropical storm force winds already along the southeast Texas coastline here into Louisiana. So unfortunately, some areas that were hit by Hurricane Laura are now receiving tropical storm force winds once again, with winds of 40, 45 miles per hour or so. So that could hinder, obviously, recovery operations there. But the bottom line is, this still is going to produce a very big rainfall threat. Certainly could bring some damaging winds, heavy rainfall, storm surge. That all remains a problem. So be mindful of it. And if you are under evacuation orders, tonight is really the last night to do so before conditions rapidly deteriorate tonight and into tomorrow. Now, moving on from Beta, this is tropical, or this is Hurricane Paulette, rather. You notice that we're starting to see a redeveloping eye structure on Hurricane Paulette, or excuse me, Hurricane Teddy, rather. This is Hurricane Teddy. And again, you can see that right now there is an eye feature trying to develop here with Hurricane Teddy. Once again, deep convection has redeveloped, but you can see that it's not as deep convection as it once was back when this was a formidable Category 4 hurricane. And the reason for that, and we talked about this substantially, is that the cooler sea surface temperatures induced by Hurricane Paulette is now causing the storm to lose some of its convective organization. Now, it does have an eye tonight, so it is looking a little bit better, traversing over maybe a little bit warmer sea surface temperatures. And obviously, the island of Bermuda is right here, and you can see that some of the outer bands are now beginning to actually impact the cirrus outflow expanding. So we still have a fairly decent outflow pool on this storm. But as of right now, again, the convective structure isn't the best, but this is going to bring impacts over the next several days to Bermuda, and a tropical storm warning has been issued for the island. This is a very large storm, and thus it's going to bring a large amount of impacts. And even the impacts here from Hurricane Teddy being felt all the way across Florida today, with some of that coastal flooding problem from these brisk winds and everything else like that. This is going to cause some problems all the way up and down the southeast and the northeast United States over the next several days or so, as this begins to lift more towards the Canadian Maritimes. Now, one of the things that's going to be kind of, steering our storm more so is we have this trough right now over New England that is in the process of cutting off from its parent trough up here. And this cutoff circulation is going to drift southward over the next several days and partially capture our storm down here. And we have this big ridge to the north, which is kind of keeping our storm moving towards the west-northwest as it tries to round that ridge there. But you can see what happens is we get this cutoff trough or cutoff low to form. And this is part of that trough that's now in the process of cutting off. And what this does is now, because our storm is sitting right here, our storm is now trying to pivot around, and you can see that's going to try to send it more towards the north-northwest here and make that bend. And we can see that on the model here by hour 30, and we'll just kind of run this forward. We can see how that process actually interacts. It tries to take our storm and move it due north-northwest here, kind of make that bend back towards the left a little bit. And then here on Tuesday, on early Tuesday, now the storm is sitting actually to the north of this trough down in here in the upper level low. So now what's going to start to happen is you'll start to see a storm now kind of correcting back to the kind of the north here, and then eventually northeast, and then out across Newfoundland and the rest of the Canadian Maritimes. We can kind of see that jog there. And then we see this kind of heading back over Newfoundland, the rest of the Canadian Maritimes, and on out there across. And again, just because this may not be a significant hurricane by this time, this is going to provide some impacts. Damaging winds, obviously, significant storm surge, heavy rainfall. This will not be a fully tropical warm core cyclone, but it will be something to monitor very carefully, because this is going to provide and pave the way for very significant impacts down the road, and that's what we're most concerned about. So if you live in the Canadian Maritimes, Newfoundland, etc., you certainly need to have your full focus on this, because while this will not be a true hurricane, this will provide hurricane-like impacts for those areas, and a tropical storm warning has been issued, a tropical storm watch has been issued for portions of the Canadian Maritimes. So this is certainly a big problem with winds, tropical storm force getting close there to hurricane force across portions of those areas. So stay tuned to your local officials and your weather office for the most accurate information. Now to what's going on across Florida. We did have an interesting system earlier, and this actually did get marked by the Hurricane Center. We saw that from earlier this morning. We had a broad low pressure center try to develop here off the coast of Florida and kind of drift around towards the southwest here, and now moving almost due west and heading into the Gulf of Mexico. And we've seen that over the course of today, this has fired some shower and thunderstorm activity right near the center. You can see a very prolific blow up in the convection over that center of circulation as it gets ready now to move out across the open Atlantic. Now, one thing that is a problem is we have a lot of wind here coming out of the northeasterly direction. You can see these clouds here moving out to the north and east, and we can see that we also then have the low-level cloud feature moving out of the west, with the upper-level cloud feature moving out of the northeast here. This is suggesting we have a lot of vertical wind shear in this region, so this is going to have a problem with organizing very substantially over the next several days while it kind of just drifts around into the Gulf of Mexico. Regardless, this did bring significant coastal flooding to portions of Volusia County, with over 9 inches of rain across portions of Volusia and Flagler County, with some significant flooding concerns. And even inland, there are some flooding concerns today across portions just east of the Orlando Metro, and obviously down south here had a problem with these training bands, and this is not going to really let up tonight. But tomorrow we'll start to see a pattern change occur. Now, the Hurricane Center officially isn't really giving this much of a shot, giving this roughly about a 0% chance, but I think the chances are a little bit higher of that actually occurring, of Tropical Cyclone Genesis occurring. This does have to be monitored. We'll have to watch this very carefully. This is the remnants here of once Hurricane Paulette moving out across south of the Azores near the Canary Islands right here. So this may bring some impacts to the far more northern Canary Islands over the next several days, but not really expecting much. Obviously, Tropical Storm Beta, Hurricane Teddy, and a weakening Tropical Depression Wilfred out here. Really, the only two land concerns is going to be Beta and Teddy, and we'll obviously watch here the remnants of ex-Hurricane Paulette. Other than that, it seems like we're going to be getting into a little bit of a quiet period now, thankfully, as the peak of the hurricane season starts to ramp down from here. But it does look like that over the next few weeks, we will have to start watching the Caribbean, the Bay of Campeche, and the Gulf of Mexico for what seems to be another active round of development out there across that region. But nothing is set in stone, and obviously that's very far out in time, but only really two land concerns at this current moment. With that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening and your early Monday morning. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow morning.